The dare was supposed to be harmless. Walk up to the most intimidating man in the casino, the one sitting alone at the high-stakes poker table with an expression that could freeze hell itself, and do something provocative enough to make her friends laugh but innocent enough to walk away. Unscathed, except Petra Voss had never been particularly good at calculating risk, which is why she found herself sliding into the empty chair beside him at exactly 11:47 p.m., close enough that her thigh pressed against his. Close enough that when she leaned in to whisper her opening line, her lips almost brushed his ear. Close enough to smell the expensive cologne and something darker underneath, smoke and danger and the kind of masculine heat that made her pulse spike. And when she breathed the words, "You look like you could use something more interesting than those cards," she watched his jaw tighten, watched his hands still on the chips he'd been stacking, watched the way his entire body went predator alert, and only then, far too late, did she notice the way every dealer in a 10-foot radius had gone pale, the way the other players at nearby tables had suddenly found reasons to leave, the way the security personnel were watching with expressions that suggested they were witnessing either the bravest or the stupidest thing they'd ever seen, completely unaware that the man whose personal space she'd just deliberately invaded was Kane Mercer, and that Kane Mercer didn't just own the casino they were sitting in. He owned half the city's underground, commanded loyalty through methods that made grown men wake up sweating, and had built a reputation so fearsome that the last person who dared to touch him without permission had simply disappeared. My name is Petra Voss, and I restore violins for people with more money than sense. That's the polite version. The truth is I'm a luthier, one of maybe 50 people in the country who can take a violin that's 300 years old and damaged almost beyond recognition and bring it back to life. I work with wood older than nations, with instruments that have made sounds no modern violin can replicate, with craftsmanship so delicate that one wrong move can destroy something irreplaceable. It's precise work, quiet, the kind of thing that requires steady hands and patience, and an obsessive attention to detail that most people don't have, which makes it deeply ironic that I was currently demonstrating absolutely none of those qualities. Tonight was supposed to be simple. Girls' night. My best friend Sage's birthday. She'd wanted somewhere fancy, somewhere we'd never normally go, somewhere that made us feel like we were living a different kind of life for a few hours. So we'd ended up at the Meridian, a casino that was less about gambling and more about being seen, the kind of place where the cheapest drink cost what I made in a day and everyone looked like they'd stepped out of a magazine spread about beautiful people doing expensive things. I'd worn a dress I couldn't afford, black silk that clung in ways that made me feel both powerful and exposed. Heels that hurt, but made my legs look good. Hair down for once instead of pulled back in the practical bun I wore for work. We'd been there maybe 2 hours. Had drinks that tasted like liquid gold. Watched people win and lose absurd amounts of money with the kind of casual indifference that only comes from having too much of it. And then Sage, 3 cocktails in and feeling bold, had pointed across the casino floor with a wicked grin. "See that guy?" She'd gestured toward the poker tables with her glass. The one who looks like he's never smiled in his entire life and might actually kill someone if they tried to make him? I dare you to go flirt with him. I'd looked, and immediately understood why she'd chosen him for the dare. He sat alone at a high-stakes table, playing against the house with a stack of chips that suggested money was a concept rather than a concern. Everything about him screamed danger wrapped in expensive tailoring. Dark suit that fit like it had been constructed around his body. Shoulders broad enough to make the jacket strain slightly when he moved. Hands that were elegant and controlled as they handled cards with the kind of precision I recognized from my own work. Someone who understood the value of careful movements. But it was his face that really sold the danger. Sharp jawline, cheekbones that could cut, mouth set in a line that suggested smiling was something other people did. And eyes, even from across the casino floor I could see they were pale, cold. The kind of gray that made you think of winter storms and things that didn't survive them. He was maybe mid-30s. Attractive in a way that felt almost threatening, like beauty weaponized. The kind of man who didn't need to smile or charm or try because his sheer presence commanded everything he wanted. Nobody was approaching him. The dealers looked nervous, even dealing his cards. Waitresses gave him wide berth. Even the other high rollers seemed to unconsciously create distance. "Absolutely not," I'd said, taking a long drink. "That man looks like he eats souls for breakfast and uses the bones to pick his teeth, which is exactly why it's the perfect dare." Sage had laughed. "Come on, Petra. When's the last time you did something actually reckless? When's the last time you talked to a man who wasn't trying to sell you aged wood or obscure varnish techniques?" She had a point. My life was safe, predictable. Violins and silence and going home to my cat. No adventure, no risk, no stories worth telling at parties. Fine. I'd set down my glass with more force than necessary. What exactly do I have to do? Make him react. Sage's grin had widened. Make Mr. Frozen actually acknowledge your existence. Bonus points if you make him smile. Double bonus if you get him to say more than 3 words. Which is how I found myself walking across the casino floor with my heart trying to punch through my ribcage. Each step in these stupid expensive heels bringing me closer to a man who radiated danger like other people radiated body heat. I didn't let myself think. Thinking would mean stopping. Stopping would mean admitting this was a terrible idea. So I just did it. Slid into the chair beside him with more confidence than I felt. Close. Deliberately close. Close enough that my thigh pressed against his under the table. Close enough that when I leaned in, ostensibly to see his cards but really just to test how far I could push, my shoulder brushed his chest and I could feel the heat of him through the expensive fabric. You look like you could use something more interesting than those cards. I pitched my voice low, intimate, the kind of tone that suggested possibilities I had no intention of delivering on, but wanted him to imagine anyway. For exactly 3 seconds, nothing happened. He didn't move, didn't look at me, didn't even seem to breathe. Then his hand, the one that had been reaching for another chip, stopped, froze mid-motion like I'd just activated some kind of pause function. Slowly, with the kind of controlled movement that suggested significant restraint, he set down the cards he'd been holding, placed his hands flat on the table, turned his head to look at me. The impact of his full attention was physical. His eyes were worse up close, not just gray but glacial, the kind of cold that burned. They swept over my face with an intensity that made me feel examined, catalogued, assessed and found. I couldn't tell what. Interesting, annoying, worthy of the effort it would take to make me regret this. When he spoke, his voice was exactly what I'd expected, and somehow still devastating. Low, controlled, rough around the edges in a way that suggested he didn't use it often and didn't particularly care if you liked the sound. You're either very brave or very stupid. Each word was precisely delivered. No wasted breath, no inflection that might give away what he was thinking. I haven't decided which yet. Can't I be both? I kept my voice steady even though my pulse was doing complicated acrobatics. That depends. He shifted slightly, not away, toward me. The movement was subtle but deliberate, closing the already minimal space between us until I could feel the heat of his body like a physical presence. Are you prepared for the consequences of deliberately provoking me? The way he said provoking made it sound sexual, made my skin heat despite the absurdity of the situation. I'm sitting in a chair, I pointed out, forcing myself not to lean back, not to give ground. Making conversation. I wasn't aware that required preparation for consequences. Then you're not paying attention. His gaze dropped, deliberately, slowly, down to where my thigh was still pressed against his, back up to my face with an expression that made it very clear he was aware of every point of contact between us. You're in my space, touching me without permission, interrupting something that matters. Those all have consequences. What kind of consequences? I asked, aware I was playing with something I didn't fully understand, but unable to stop myself. That depends on why you're doing it. He leaned back slightly, but somehow the movement didn't create distance. It changed the angle, made him look even more intimidating looming over me. You're here on a dare. Your friends are watching from the bar. You think flirting with the dangerous-looking man makes for a good story. Am I close? The accuracy should have embarrassed me. Instead, it intrigued me. How do you know it's a dare? Because women like you don't approach men like me without motivation. He picked up his drink, something amber and expensive looking, and took a slow sip without breaking eye contact. You're nervous. I can see your pulse in your throat. You're here because someone challenged you, not because you actually want to be, which makes this performance. And I'm not interested in being your entertainment. Women like me? I raised an eyebrow, refusing to be dismissed. You don't know anything about me. His mouth almost curved. Almost. I know you work with your hands. He gestured toward them where they rested on the table. Calluses in specific places, faint smell of varnish and wood oil, something delicate, precise. I know that dress cost you more than you wanted to spend. It's beautiful, but you keep adjusting it like you're not used to wearing something that fits this well. I know those heels are hurting your feet, but you're too stubborn to show it. And I know that in approximately 30 seconds you're going to realize this dare was a mistake, and you're going to walk away. Everything he said was accurate, uncomfortably so. He'd read me like I was a book written in large, obvious font. What if I don't walk away? I challenged. What if I stay here and continue being exactly as annoying as I'm clearly being until you actually acknowledge that I might be more than just an inconvenience? That got a reaction, not a smile. But his eyes changed, sharpened, like I'd just said something that elevated me from nuisance to something else. Then you'd be making a very dangerous decision. He set down his glass, turned in his chair to face me more fully. The movement brought him even closer, close enough that I could see flecks of darker gray in those pale eyes. Close enough that when he spoke, I felt the words as much as heard them. Because acknowledging you means claiming you, and I don't do anything halfway. So if I look at you as more than an interruption, you become mine for the rest of this evening. No going back to your friends to laugh about the dangerous man. No walking away when you get bored. You stay, and we see exactly how brave you actually are. The possessiveness should have sent me running, should have triggered every self-preservation instinct I possessed. Instead, it made something in my stomach clench with want. That's very presumptuous. I managed to keep my voice steady, assuming I'd want to be claimed. You're still here, he pointed out, still pressed against me. Still looking at me like you're trying to decide if I'm as dangerous as everyone clearly thinks I am. That suggests you want something, even if you don't know what it is yet. Maybe I'm just stubborn. Then we have that in common. His hand moved, not to touch me, not quite, but to rest on the table between us, close enough that if I moved my own hand even slightly, we'd be touching. I'll ask you one more time. Walk away now. This ends as a funny story. Stay, and you're mine until I decide to let you go. Choose carefully.
If you're already hooked on this story, don't forget to like this video right now. Drop a comment telling me if Petra should walk away or if she's right to stay. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss what happens when she discovers exactly who Kane Mercer really is.
Hit that notification bell. I should have left. Every rational part of my brain was screaming at me to thank him for his time, return to my friends, and never think about this again. Instead, I moved my hand, let my fingers brush against his where they rested on the table. The touch was electric, deliberate, an answer to a question he'd asked. His eyes darkened. Bad decision. Probably. I agreed. But I'm making it anyway. Then we're leaving. He stood in one fluid movement, offered his hand. Your friends can find their own way home. You're with me now. The command in his voice should have bothered me, should have made me bristle at being told what to do. Instead, I took his hand, let him pull me to my feet with a strength that was carefully controlled but unmistakably present. His fingers closed around mine, possessive, warm, large enough to engulf my hand completely. Last chance. He leaned down, mouth close to my ear, voice dropping to something that scraped along my nerve endings. Walk away right now and I'll let you. Stay, and you're mine for tonight. Every rule is mine to set. Every boundary is mine to push. And when I take you upstairs to somewhere private, you don't get to pretend you didn't know exactly what you were agreeing to. Understand? The heat of his breath against my ear made coherent thought difficult. I understand. Good. He straightened. Then say goodbye to your friends. You have 2 minutes. I walked back to the bar on unsteady legs. Sage took one look at my face and grabbed my arm. Are you insane? She hissed. That man looks like he could break you in half without even trying. I'm fine. The words came out more breathless than intended. I'm just going to see where this goes. Petra, he looks like he eats people. Literally. I'll text you. I promised. Every hour. If anything feels wrong, I'll leave. But I think I need to do this. You're completely insane. Sage hugged me hard. Text me every hour, or I'm calling every cop in the city. I returned to where Kane waited. He hadn't moved, hadn't looked away, had simply stood there radiating patience and possession in equal measure. Done? He asked when I reached him. Done. Then let's go. His hand found the small of my back. The touch was possessive, proprietary. His palm burned through the thin silk of my dress. And Petra? He leaned down again, mouth brushing my ear. Stop looking so nervous. I'm not going to hurt you, but I am going to make you forget every safe choice you've ever made. He guided me through the casino, not toward the exit, toward a private elevator that required a key card I watched him produce from his jacket. The doors closed. We were alone. The space felt smaller suddenly, more intimate. I could feel the heat of him behind me, could see his reflection in the polished doors, could sense the way he was watching me, with an intensity that made my skin prickle. Where are we going? My voice came out quieter than intended. My office. He stepped closer, not touching but close enough that I could feel him. I own this casino. Have a space upstairs, somewhere private, somewhere we can talk without an audience. Just talk? That depends entirely on you. His reflection showed me the ghost of a smile. But I should warn you, I'm not good at restraint, and you're making it very difficult to remember why I should try. The elevator opened before I could respond. He guided me down a hallway that was nothing like the opulent casino below. Simple, elegant, expensive in a way that didn't announce itself. His office was stunning. Floor-to-ceiling windows, minimalist furniture, a bar, sitting area, desk that looked like sculpture. Drink? He moved to the bar without waiting for an answer. You look like you need it. What are you making? Something strong enough that you stop looking at me like you're trying to decide if this was a terrible idea. He poured amber liquid into crystal glasses. For the record, it probably was, but we're both here anyway. He handed me a glass. Our fingers brushed. The contact lasted longer than necessary. Why did you really bring me up here? I asked. Because what I want to do to you requires privacy. He said it casually, like it wasn't the most loaded statement I'd ever heard. And because I'm trying to be less of a monster than usual by giving you one more chance to leave before this goes somewhere you can't take back. What makes you think I want to take it back? Because you're smart. He moved closer, crowded into my space with deliberate intent. And smart women don't get involved with men like me. Men who solve problems in ways that would horrify you. Men whose world is built on things you've probably never had to think about. Men who want things with an intensity that most people find uncomfortable. And what do you want? I asked, refusing to back up, refusing to give ground even though my heart was trying to escape my chest. Right now? He reached up, brushed a strand of hair away from my face with fingers that were surprisingly gentle. You, underneath me, making sounds that prove you're exactly as affected by this as I am. But I'm trying to be civilized, trying to give you the option to walk away before I stop offering it. The bluntness should have shocked me, should have made me realize this was moving too fast, too intense. Instead, it made me I don't want civilized. The words came out before I could stop them. I came up here knowing what it meant. I stayed when you warned me to leave. I'm not stupid. I know what you're offering, and I want it. His control cracked. I saw it in his eyes, felt it in the way his hand tightened in my hair. You're sure? His voice had gone rough. Because once I start, I'm not stopping. Once I touch you, the way I want to touch you, you're mine. And I don't share. I'm sure. He kissed me, hard, consuming, like he'd been holding back and had finally decided to stop trying. I kissed back with equal intensity, hands fisting in his jacket, body pressing against his, making it clear I wanted exactly what he was offering. His hands were everywhere, tangling in my hair, gripping my waist, pulling me closer until there wasn't space between us for doubt or hesitation. When he broke the kiss, we were both breathing hard. His eyes were dark, intense, fixed on me with an expression that made me feel claimed. This changes things. His thumb traced my jaw. The touch was possessive. You're not walking out of here as a story to tell your friends. You're leaving as mine. Understand? Yes. Good. He kissed me again. Slower this time, but no less intense. Because I don't do temporary, and I don't do casual, and I definitely don't do this with women I plan on forgetting. What happened next I won't detail completely. But hours later I understood why he'd warned me, why he'd given me chances to leave. Because this, whatever this was, wasn't casual, wasn't simple, wasn't something you could walk away from unchanged. Later, much later, when the city lights had shifted from late night to early morning, I lay beside him trying to process everything that had happened. He was watching me, had been for several minutes based on the way he seemed completely comfortable with the silence. You're thinking too loud. His voice was different now, less controlled, more human. What's going on in that head? I'm trying to decide if I just made the best or worst decision of my life. Honest, raw. And I'm realizing I don't actually know anything about you beyond the fact that you're intense and dangerous and apparently own casinos. And that bothers you? It should bother me. I turned to face him. Normal people learn names before this. Normal people have dinner, conversation, something beyond chemistry and warning signs. We're not normal people. He traced patterns on my shoulder that made me shiver. And I think we both knew that the moment you decided to stay. But if you want answers, ask. I'll give you truth. Might not like it, but it'll be real. Before we continue, I need to ask you something. Where are you watching this story from? What country? Drop your location in the comments right now. And tell me, is Petra brave or reckless? Should she trust Kane or run while she still can? Would you stay with someone this intense, this dangerous, this commanding? If you want more stories with casino provocations that change everything, dangerous men with devastating control, and chemistry that burns through every logical reason to walk away, you absolutely must subscribe to this channel and hit that notification bell. Turn on all notifications so you never miss when I drop a new story. Seriously, subscribe right now, then let's get back to Petra and Kane. Who are you really? I asked. Beyond owning this casino, beyond being the man everyone's afraid of. Who is Kane Mercer? He was quiet for a long moment. Then, someone you shouldn't have approached. Someone whose world doesn't mix with violin restoration and safe choices. Someone who's going to complicate your life in ways you probably can't imagine yet. That's not an answer. No, but it's honest. He sat up. The movement was graceful, controlled. You want the whole truth? I run operations that exist in spaces the law doesn't quite reach. I make decisions that affect people's lives and livelihoods. I've done things that would horrify you. And being with me means becoming visible to people who might see you as leverage, as weakness to exploit, as a way to hurt me. The clinical delivery made it worse somehow. He wasn't trying to scare me, just stating facts. You're, what exactly? Mafia, organized crime? Those terms are imprecise but essentially accurate. He watched my face for reaction. I control territory, manage operations, enforce agreements when people forget why keeping them matters. I'm transitioning toward legitimacy, working to build something that doesn't require those methods. But that process takes time. And until it's complete, associating with me carries risks. I should have been terrified, should have left immediately. Why tell me this? I asked instead. Why not just let me think you're a businessman? Let me keep the fantasy. Because I don't do fantasy. His hand found my face, gentle despite everything else about him that was hard edges. And because if you're going to decide whether to see me again, it should be an informed decision, not one based on what you imagine I am. See you again? I repeated. You want that? Even knowing this complicates everything? Want is inadequate, he said quietly. What I feel about you is considerably more intense than want. You walked up to me like I wasn't dangerous, stayed when I warned you to leave, met intensity with boldness, and I find that compelling, addictive, worth the complications. So what happens now? Now you decide. Simple. Direct. You can leave. Go back to your life. I'll make sure you're protected. Make sure nobody in my world knows you existed. Or you can stay. See where this goes. With full knowledge of what I am and what being with me means. I looked at him. This man who'd been terrifying in the casino. Who'd kissed me like I was oxygen and he was suffocating. Who was now offering me an escape he clearly didn't want me to take. I need time, I said. To think, to process, to figure out if I'm actually brave enough for this or if I just got caught up in chemistry and adrenaline. Understandable. He didn't look disappointed, just resigned. I'll have a car take you home. That's it? Just, here's a car. Goodbye. What did you expect? He stood, started dressing with efficiency that suggested long practice. I'm not going to beg you to stay. Not going to manipulate you into choosing me. You get time, space, clarity. And when you've decided if you want to see me again, you know where to find me. The car was absurdly luxurious, the driver professional and silent. And as I rode back to Brooklyn, I tried to make sense of the past 8 hours. I'd walked into a casino on a dare, provoked the most dangerous man there, spent the night with someone I barely knew, and discovered he was exactly as dangerous as he appeared, but somehow that made me want him more, not less. The smart choice was obvious. Walk away, never look back, return to safety. But sitting in my apartment surrounded by quiet and violins and the life I'd built on careful choices, all I could think about was the way Kane had looked at me, like I was rare, worth protecting, worth wanting despite every logical reason to walk away. 3 days passed. I worked, restored a violin from 1702, had dinner with Sage who insisted I never see Kane again. He told you he's a criminal, Petra. She'd said it gently, literally told you. That's your cue to run. I know. And you're thinking about seeing him again anyway. I can't stop thinking about him, I admitted. About the way he looked at me, the way he gave me choice instead of making assumptions, the way he's dangerous but was careful with me. That's literally the bare minimum. Not being dangerous to you shouldn't be impressive. She was right, logically, rationally, in every way that made sense. But on day 4, I went back to the casino. He was there. Same table, same cold expression that made everyone else keep their distance. I didn't sit this time, just stood at a distance until he noticed. When he did, his entire demeanor changed, not softened, but focused, like everything else in the room had ceased to exist except me. He stood, walked over with predatory grace, looked down at me with those gray eyes that had haunted my dreams. You came back. I came back. My heart was racing. I'm probably making a terrible decision, probably going to regret this, but I can't stop thinking about you. And I need to know if what I felt was real or just adrenaline and chemistry. And if it's real, then I want to see where it goes. I took a breath, with full knowledge of who you are and what that means. He kissed me, right there in the middle of the casino, in front of everyone, making it absolutely clear I wasn't a secret. When he pulled back, his hand was still cupped around the back of my neck, possessive and gentle at once. "This won't be easy," he said quietly. "My world is complicated, dangerous, not designed for people like you. Maybe I'm tired of being people like me," I said. "Maybe I want complicated and dangerous. Then you're mine." Not a question, a statement. Completely. I don't do halfway, don't do casual. You're in my life now, which means you're under my protection, which means anyone who wants to hurt you goes through me first. Understand? The possessiveness should have bothered me. Instead, it felt like safety. I understand. Good. He kissed me again, slower, deeper. A promise. Then let's figure out how to make this work. The next year was unlike anything I'd experienced. Kane didn't hide what he was, didn't pretend, but he also kept me separate from operations. Protected, created boundaries that kept me safe while letting me see enough to understand his world. I learned his coldness was armor, that he'd built walls to survive a world that didn't reward vulnerability, that underneath the terrifying exterior was someone who valued loyalty and honesty and competence above everything else. He came to my studio, watched me work with focus that made me self-conscious, asked questions about technique that showed he actually listened, revealed unexpected knowledge about music and craftsmanship. I saw his world wasn't just violence, it was strategy, building networks, protecting territory, making sure operations ran smoothly through intelligence rather than force. And I watched him change, slowly, deliberately. He'd been transitioning before we met, he told me, working toward legitimacy, cutting ties with the worst operations, building something that could exist in daylight. But meeting me had accelerated that, made him want it more, want to be someone I didn't have to make excuses for. "Why?" I asked one night in his penthouse. "Why does my opinion matter so much?" "Because you see me. Simple, honest, not the reputation, not the fear. Me. And you stayed anyway. That's rare. Worth protecting. Worth becoming better for." The transformation wasn't overnight, wasn't dramatic, but it was real. He divested from operations that couldn't be cleaned, invested in legitimate businesses, used his networks for legal purposes, built something substantial from something dark. But the process brought challenges neither of us anticipated. 6 months into our relationship, one of Kane's former associates, someone who hadn't appreciated being cut out during the transition, decided to make a point by targeting what Kane cared about. I was working late in my studio when the first brick came through my window. No note, no warning, just shattered glass and the clear message that someone knew I mattered to Kane. I called him immediately. He arrived within 10 minutes, moving through my studio with controlled fury that was somehow more terrifying than if he'd been openly angry. "Pack a bag," he said after examining the damage. "You're staying with me until this is handled. I'm not letting someone chase me out of my own space. This isn't negotiable." His voice was steel. "Someone just sent a message. They know you're important to me, which means they'll use you to get to me if they can. So you stay with me where I can protect you, or I handle this my way, and you don't like the methods I use. Choose." The ultimatum should have made me angry. Instead, I recognized it for what it was. Fear. He was scared for me, scared enough to be blunt instead of diplomatic. "Okay," I said, "but only if you promise me something." "What?" "That you won't revert, won't handle this using the old methods. That you'll deal with this the way you've been dealing with everything else. Strategically, legally, without adding to the darkness you're trying to leave behind." He was quiet for a long moment. "That might take longer, might be more complicated. I don't care." I moved closer to him. "I fell for the man you're becoming, not the man you were. So handle this as him, please. You're asking me to show restraint when someone threatened you. I'm asking you to prove that the transformation is real, that you can protect me without compromising the progress you've made." He pulled me close, held me with a gentleness that contrasted with the tension in his body. "You ask for things that are harder than you know. I know exactly how hard I'm asking," I said, "but I also know you're capable of it." He proved me right. Spent the next 2 weeks using resources and connections to identify who was responsible. Built a case, applied pressure through legal channels and business relationships. Made it clear that targeting me had been a catastrophic miscalculation, all without reverting to the methods he was trying to leave behind. The associate in question lost contracts, lost backing, lost standing in communities that mattered, all without violence, all through strategic application of influence. When it was over, Kane looked exhausted in a way I'd never seen. That was harder than just handling it the old way. He admitted one night. Every instinct wanted to make it quick, permanent, the way I used to solve problems. But you didn't, because you asked me not to. He pulled me close. Because proving I can be better matters more than proving I can be dangerous. You did that. Made me want to be someone worthy of the faith you're putting in me. Moments like that taught me something important about transformation. It wasn't linear, wasn't simple, was a constant choice. A daily decision to do things differently, even when the old ways were easier. And I watched Kane make that choice again and again, through setbacks and frustrations and moments when everything would have been simpler if he'd just reverted to who he'd been. But he didn't. He kept choosing better. 18 months into our relationship, he introduced me to his family, or what remained of it. A younger sister who distanced herself when his reputation got too dark. Parents who'd been disappointed by his choices but never stopped hoping he'd change. Dinner was awkward, tense. His sister Claire kept looking at me like she couldn't figure out if I was brave or delusional for being with him. "You seem nice," she'd said when we had a moment alone, "which makes me wonder what you're doing with my brother." "I'm building a life with someone who's working very hard to become better," I said honestly. "He's not who he was, and I believe he won't be in the future either." "He told you?" "Not a question. About what he's done, what he's been. He told me everything, and you stayed anyway." "And I stayed because of who he's becoming, not despite who he's been." Claire studied me. "Then, he's different with you. Softer, more human. I haven't seen him like this since before everything went dark. If you can keep doing that, keep making him want to be better, then maybe there's hope for him after all." The evening ended better than it started. Not perfect, but real. A step toward healing relationships he'd damaged during years of being someone else. And watching him with his family, seeing him try, really try, to rebuild trust and show them he was changing, made me fall for him even more deeply. 2 years after that casino dare, standing in my studio surrounded by violins, he asked me to marry him. No grand gesture. Just the two of us and honesty. "I'm not perfect," he said, holding a ring that was simple and elegant and exactly my taste. "My past isn't clean. There are things I can't undo, people I've hurt, choices I regret, but I'm trying to be better every day, to build something worthy of you. And I want to build it with you. Will you marry me?" "Yes." No hesitation. "Yes." Even knowing everything you know, even knowing I'll probably struggle with old patterns sometimes, even knowing my past might surface in ways we can't predict, especially knowing all that, I said. "Because I've watched you transform, watched you choose difficult change over easy stagnation, watched you become remarkable not because it was natural, but because you decided to be. I don't love who you were. I love who you're becoming, and I want to be part of that journey." The wedding was small, private, people who mattered. Claire was there, tears in her eyes. His parents, cautiously hopeful. Sage, who'd stopped warning me away and started celebrating that I'd found something real. And standing there, watching Kane actually smile, really smile, the kind that reached his eyes and made him look years younger, I thought about that dare, about Sage challenging me to provoke the most serious man in the casino. I'd thought I was just accepting a challenge, making my friends laugh, having a story to tell. Instead, I'd provoked someone into remembering he could be more than reputation, more than fear, more than the coldness everyone projected onto him. I'd seen the man underneath, had been brave enough, or reckless enough, to believe that dangerous didn't mean irredeemable, that intensity could be redirected, that someone willing to do the work could transform, and he'd proved me right, had become someone who used his considerable capabilities for building instead of destroying, who protected instead of threatened, who loved with the same fierce focus he'd once used for survival. The years that followed brought their own challenges, former associates who resented his legitimacy, business complications, moments when old instincts tried to resurface, but we faced them together, and each time, Kane chose better, chose the harder path, chose to be the person he was becoming instead of reverting to who he'd been. 3 years after the wedding, I found out I was pregnant. The news terrified him in ways I'd never seen. "What if I can't do this?" he'd asked, voice raw. "What if I'm too damaged? What if I revert when the pressure gets too high? What if our child grows up afraid of me the way everyone else is? Then we deal with it." I'd taken his hands. "Together. You're not doing this alone. And Kane, You've already proved you can change. You've been doing it for years. Being a father is just another part of that journey. What if I'm not good at it? Then you'll learn. The same way you learned everything else. One day at a time. One choice at a time. Our daughter Lyric was born on a spring morning, and watching Cain hold her for the first time, seeing his hands, which had done terrible things, cradle something so precious with such careful gentleness, I knew we'd be okay. He was terrified, awed, completely devoted within seconds. And true to his nature, he approached fatherhood the way he approached everything else that mattered, with absolute commitment. Read every book, asked endless questions, threw himself into being present and engaged and determined to be the father his daughter deserved. 5 years after that casino dare, watching him play with Lyric in our living room, building elaborate structures with blocks, making her laugh with silly voices, being gentle and patient and everything good, I was overwhelmed with gratitude. For the dare that started everything. For being brave enough, reckless enough, to approach a man everyone else feared. For seeing past the exterior to the person underneath. For believing transformation was possible even when it seemed unlikely. Cain caught me watching. Smiled in that way he only smiled for me and Lyric. "Well, what are you thinking?" he asked. "That I'm grateful," I said honestly, "for all of it. The risk, the challenge, the transformation. I'm the one who should be grateful." He stood, came over, pulled me close while Lyric continued playing. "You saw something in me worth saving when I'd given up on myself. Believed I could be better when I wasn't sure I could. Stayed when leaving would have been safer. You did that. All of it. We did it together. I corrected. I believed. But you did the work. Made the choices. Became this person. That was all you. Motivated by you. Maybe, but executed by you. Own it. You're not who you were. You're someone remarkable. And I'm proud of you." That night, after Lyric was asleep, we stood at the window overlooking the city. The same city where he'd once operated in shadows, where his reputation had been built on fear. Now he operated in daylight, built things instead of controlling them through force, used his resources for good instead of just profit. The transformation was complete, real, permanent. And it had all started with a dare, with a reckless decision to approach the most dangerous man in the room, with chemistry and courage and the belief that people could change if they wanted to badly enough. Some people still didn't believe it, still saw him as the man he'd been, still expected him to revert. But those who knew him, really knew him, saw the truth, saw someone who'd fought his way out of darkness into light, who'd transformed not because it was easy, but because it mattered. And I got to be part of that. Got to witness and support and love someone through the hardest work a person can do, becoming someone better. Best dare I'd ever accepted, best decision I'd ever made, best life I could have imagined, all because I'd been brave enough, reckless enough to provoke the most serious man in the casino. And he'd been brave enough to let me. If you made it to the end of Petra and Cain's complete journey from reckless casino dare to transformative love, from dangerous provocation to devoted partnership, from feared criminal to loving father who plays with blocks and makes silly voices, from cold reputation to warm reality, smash that like button right now. Tell me in the comments, would you have approached him that night? Was Petra insane or inspired? Do you believe transformation like this is really possible? Could you love someone through that kind of change? What would you have done in her place? Then you need to subscribe to this channel immediately. Hit that notification bell and turn on all notifications so you never miss another story about casino dares that change destinies, dangerous intensity becoming devoted love, chemistry that defies logic, and transformations that prove people can become who they choose to be. Thank you so much for watching this journey with me, and I'll see you in the next story. Don't forget, like, comment, subscribe, and turn on that bell. See you soon. Claude é uma IA e pode cometer erros. Por favor, verifique as respostas.